The well was supposed to be dry. Everyone said so. The land agent swore to it, the papers certified it, and the locals in town all shook their heads with knowing looks when they mentioned it. But when I, Hannah Morgan, lowered my rope into the stone-lined mouth of that forgotten well on a crisp autumn afternoon, 30 feet down, something scraped against a rock. A sharp metallic sound that carried up the shaft and made me stop cold. I sit here now, 58 years old, on the porch of what has become my home, watching the sunset over Willow Creek Ranch. The well stands silently in the distance, partially covered now but never forgotten. That old stone circle changed my life twice. First when I found the coins, and later when I understood their true value had nothing to do with gold. The deed had called this place abandoned acreage. The last two owners had vanished, leaving debts unpaid and belongings untouched. No one wanted it. That's why the government had practically begged someone to take it for a pittance. I had nothing left to lose, not after the bank seized my family's farm of 30 years, not after Roger walked out on our 27-year marriage, saying a woman couldn't keep land afloat alone, not with my daughter Elizabeth living her own life 3 states away. The first time I laid eyes on Willow Creek, I saw only the ghosts of what it once had been. The weathered 2-story farmhouse with its wide porch sagged in places like an old man too tired to stand straight. The barn's roof had partially collapsed on one side. Fields that should have been rich with crops lay barren and untended. And standing alone, halfway between the house and the barn, that old stone well, its wooden cover warped and grayed by years of sun and rain. Duke, my aging border collie with the scar across one eye, whined at my boots as I surveyed what would either be my salvation or my final failure. I rested my hand on his grizzled head, feeling the coarse fur beneath my fingers. "Well, boy," I whispered, "this is it, our last stand. Have you ever had to start over at my age? Perhaps you're listening to this story from a familiar place, your own porch or garden where you've spent countless years. Take a moment, look around you, and feel your own space while I tell you about my first day at Willow Creek." The bucket sloshed heavy as I pulled it up that day, hand over hand, my palms raw against the rough hemp. Clear, cold water, the kind a woman prays for out here in dry country. My heart leapt. Maybe this land wasn't cursed after all. Then I saw it. Nestled at the bottom of the bucket, glinting against the water, was a coin. Not a coin I'd ever laid eyes on before. Gold, or something denser. Its face stamped with markings that weren't English, Spanish, or anything I could name. Strange characters, looping and sharp, worn but legible. I fished it out, and the metal was warm. Too warm for something just pulled from cool well water. It felt heavier than gold had any right to be, and it pulsed faintly, like holding a tiny heart. "Now what in heaven's name are you?" I whispered. Duke growled low, ears pinned back. His eyes weren't on the coin, but on the well itself, dark and yawning behind me. He barked once, sharp, as though trying to warn me. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." I whirled, my hand instinctively going to the knife at my belt. A rider approached on a dappled gray mare, a woman, tall, in her mid-60s, with steel gray hair tied back, severe and neat. Her riding coat was well-made, the kind bought with money but scuffed from real work. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, locked on me. The rider dismounted smoothly, boots crunching on dry earth. "Margaret Reed," she said. "I own the spread east of here. Been watching you since you arrived." I straightened, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Hannah Morgan, just setting up." I nodded toward the well. "Woman's got a drink." Margaret's eyes flicked towards the well, and for the briefest instant I saw fear there. "That well's been trouble since the day it was dug," she said flatly. "You'd best leave it be." I arched a brow. "Trouble? Looks like water to me." "Water's only the start." Margaret stepped closer, lowering her voice. "David Stone found that out the hard way. The last owner." "What happened to him?" Margaret's gaze drifted toward the horizon. "Nobody knows for certain. One day he was patching fences and talking about striking rich. Next day, gone. Vanished. Left food on the table, boots by the bed, horse still in the corral." I felt the coin in my pocket grow hotter, pulsing faintly in rhythm with my heartbeat. I forced myself to keep my face calm. Maybe he moved on. Plenty of men get restless. Margaret shook her head. Not Stone. He wasn't the running type. She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small cloth bundle. She unwrapped it slowly, carefully, as if it might bite. Inside lay another coin identical to the one in my pocket. Found this in my chicken coop 3 days after Stone disappeared, Margaret said. Buried 6 inches deep in the dirt floor. My hens wouldn't go near that corner after. Had to move them entirely. The 2 coins caught the last of the afternoon sun, throwing strange reflections that seemed to shift if I looked too long. What aren't you telling me, Mrs. Reed? I asked, my voice steady despite the chill creeping up my spine. Margaret hesitated, her hard mask slipping just a fraction. This ranch has eaten men before Stone. The locals say it goes back further, long before any of us. All I know is coins show up, men go missing, and the land sits empty until the next poor soul comes along. She mounted her horse. You'd best leave, Hannah Morgan. Tonight, if you're smart. She rode east, not looking back, leaving me alone with Duke and a decision that would change everything. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the oil lamp casting long shadows across the room. The coin lay before me, catching the light despite the tarnish. Duke rested his head on my lap, his warmth a comfort against the growing chill. I thought about Roger's words the day he left. You're too old to start over, Hannah. You'll lose everything trying to prove a point. His voice had been tinged not with cruelty but with what he thought was practicality. 27 years of marriage, and in the end, he couldn't see me as anything but fragile. Before I was a farmer's wife, I was a nurse in Desert Storm. I'd held men together with nothing but gauze and willpower, made split-second decisions with lives hanging in the balance. I'd learned then that fear was just another vital sign to monitor, acknowledge it, respect it, but never let it dictate your actions. I tied my rope tight around the well's rim and tested the knot twice. Stay sharp, Duke, I murmured. The hound whined low, tail tucked, but he didn't leave my side as I swung myself over the edge and began the slow descent into the well's throat, boots scraping against cold stone. The circle of sky above shrank as I dropped lower. The air grew cooler, damper. My boots hit bottom, not water but loose dirt and scattered debris. Someone had been digging here recently. I struck a match, and the flames sputtered, revealing scratch marks carved into the stone. Clear signs of tools and coins. Dozens of them lay scattered in the dirt, glinting in the flickering light. They formed a rough circle around something half buried in the center. A wooden box, heavy as iron, small as a book but dense as stone. I stuffed coins into my pockets, too many to count, until my jeans sagged with the burden. My last match burned down to my fingers. As it sputtered out, the faint glow revealed rough letters carved into the wall. They're watching. They know what I found. If I vanish, look in the old church foundation. DS. The flame died, plunging me into darkness. My breath came fast as I hugged the box tight against my chest and scrambled for the rope. Above, Duke barked furiously. Sharp, frantic barks that sent me climbing faster than I thought possible, coins clanking in my pockets, my heart pounding like thunder. When I hauled myself over the rim, the stars had already spilled across the night sky. Duke danced in circles, barking at something I couldn't see in the darkness beyond. I opened the box by lamplight back in the house, my hands trembling. Inside lay a folded letter, ink faded and shaky. To whoever finds this, my name is David Stone. If you're reading this, I'm already dead. The coins are bait. Someone has been using them to lure people here. They've been watching me for weeks. The real treasure isn't gold, it's information. Check the old church foundation half a mile north. Look for the loose stone marked with an X, but be careful. They know when someone finds the coins. They're probably already watching you. DS. A branch snapped in the darkness outside. Then another. Duke's growl deepened, teeth bared toward the scrubland. I doused the lamp and clutched the box tight, listening to footsteps crunching, deliberate, circling my house. Have you ever faced a moment when you realized your life was about to change irreversibly? When skills you'd learned decades ago suddenly become your lifeline? I often wonder what you would have done in my position that night. The door creaked open. Three silhouettes stood framed in moonlight. The tall one in the center stepped forward, a man in his mid-50s with silver at his temples and eyes like winter ice. Victor Blackwood. I would come to know that name all too well. Well now, he drawled. Didn't expect the new rancher to be a woman your age, but I reckon it makes no difference. Flanking him stood two others, Mason, scarred across one cheek, cold-eyed and wiry, and Garrett, broad-shouldered with the blank expression of a man who followed orders without question. I forced steel into my voice. This is my property. You've no business on it. Blackwood chuckled low. Property is a slippery word out here. Truth is, this land belongs to certain business interests. We've been waiting for the next poor soul curious enough to poke around that well. Mason stepped forward. She's found something. Look at her pockets. I shifted my stance, the weight of the nursing scissors I still carried after all these years pressing against my thigh through the fabric of my jeans. Duke growled, lips curled back. What you got there in your pocket, Blackwood said. That's ours. Funny, looks like it came out of my well. The conversation might have continued, but headlights swept the front of the house. A black sedan pulled up, its engine purring expensive and quiet. The man who stepped out wore authority like a tailored suit, because he was wearing one, despite the late hour and dusty surroundings. Judge Holloway, Blackwood nodded deferentially. We were just explaining the situation. Harold Holloway, 65 with the polished demeanor of old money and older power, surveyed me with the disinterest one might give a fly before swatting it. Ms. Morgan, is it? His voice was cultured, almost pleasant. I'm afraid you've stumbled into something rather complicated. Those coins you found are payment markers for certain imports. Nothing that concerns a woman of your station. In that moment, I saw through it all. Not just smuggling, but corruption reaching into the highest offices of the territory. The judge's presence confirmed everything David Stone had died to expose. Now, Holloway continued, you'll sign over this property to Mr. Blackwood's company, and we'll forget this unfortunate encounter. I thought about the decades I'd spent following rules, building a life by society's blueprint, marriage, family, respectable work. Where had it gotten me? Abandoned at 58 with nothing but a loyal dog and a stolen farm. No, I said simply. Holloway's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Mason, Garrett. Escort Ms. Morgan to her vehicle. She can take her personal effects. Make sure she understands that discussing tonight's events would be unhealthy. What happened next came from muscle memory I didn't know I still possessed. The nursing scissors sliced through the air, embedding in the wooden doorframe inches from Holloway's ear. In the split second of shocked silence, I lunged for the back door, whistling sharply for Duke. Get her! Holloway bellowed, his cultured voice cracking. I burst through the kitchen and into the night, Duke at my heels. Maple, my rangy sorrel mare, was already nervous from the commotion. I vaulted onto her bare back, the satchel with the box and coins bouncing against my side as we thundered into the darkness. Behind us, guns fired. Bullets hissed past as we raced toward the North Ridge. The old church ruins lay somewhere beyond. My only hope for answers, for justice, for survival. The desert stretched endless, stars sharp and cruel above. Maple's breath came harsh beneath me. Duke's paws drummed the earth like war drums. I clutched the satchel tight, every bone in my body screaming with fear and fury. At 58, I should have been rocking on a porch somewhere, not fleeing armed men in the dead of night. Yet somehow, I felt more alive than I had in years. Have you ever discovered strength within yourself that you never knew existed? Sometimes the greatest challenges reveal parts of ourselves we've forgotten or never recognized. I wonder if you've had such a moment of revelation in your own life. The church ruins loomed against the starlit sky. Stone walls collapsed to waist height, a bell tower stump leaning like a broken tooth. I slid from Maple's back, legs shaking, and moved quickly to the north wall. There, in the moonlight, a single stone carved with a rough X. I wedged the crowbar I'd taken from the ranch into the marked stone. The rock shifted, groaning like something reluctant to release its secrets. Behind me, hoofbeats approached. Blackwood's voice rang out across the ruins. That's far enough, Ms. Morgan. The stone gave way, I wrenched it free, heart pounding. Behind it lay a hollow, and within, a metal box. I dragged it out just as gunfire cracked again. The bullet shattered stone inches from my hand. Inside the box lay bundles of papers, ledgers, and documents stamped with official seals. Even in the dim light, I saw names scrolled in bold signatures: judges, officials, customs agents, lists of shipments, bribes paid, weapons stolen and sold. A map of corruption running deeper than I could have imagined. Among the papers was a photograph, a group of military personnel from Desert Storm. I recognized myself, younger, standing beside a man whose face I knew. David Stone. He'd been a military investigator back then, someone I'd treated for heat stroke once. He'd remembered me all these years later, left clues he hoped I'd understand. Blackwood and his men crested the ridge, rifles raised. "Hand it over," he called. "That box ain't yours." I rose slowly, papers trembling in my hands. Duke stood at my feet, teeth bared. "I know what you're doing," I shouted back. "This isn't just smuggling, it's treason. You've got judges in your pocket, federal agents. I've got proof, and I knew David Stone. He trusted me to finish what he started." Blackwood's face changed at the mention of Stone's name. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, or memory, crossed his features. "You think holding some papers makes you powerful?" he said. "Those names won't save you." "I'm not alone," I lied, holding up one sheet. "Before I came, I sent copies to newspapers across the territory. If I don't return by sunrise, they'll know exactly where to dig." It was bluff, pure and wild, but Blackwood's face flickered with doubt. "She's lying," Mason snarled. "Maybe," Blackwood said softly, "but maybe not, and I ain't willing to stake my life on a maybe." For 3 agonizing days, Duke and I traveled north, keeping off main trails. We rested in dry washes by day and rode by night, following the stars. The papers weighed on me as heavily as iron, each page a nail in the coffin of men who believed themselves untouchable. On the second night, an elderly farming couple took us in without questions, gave us food and shelter. The woman, Martha, told me about their son, lost to the drugs that Holloway's network smuggled in through the border. "Nobody would listen," she said, her weathered hands trembling. "Nobody would help." I showed her the papers. Someone's listening now. The territorial capital wasn't much compared to cities back east, a scattering of brick buildings around a grand courthouse. To me, dusty and hollow-eyed after my journey, it looked like salvation. I dismounted stiffly in front of the marshal's office. Duke flopped at my feet, tongue lolling, paws raw from the long journey. Inside, Marshal Marcus Harper looked me over with initial suspicion that melted into stunned silence as he reviewed the contents of David Stone's box. "Ma'am," he said finally, "you've just walked into the hornet's nest. I was given protection, a safe house on the edge of town. Special Agent Carl Jenkins was assigned to guard me during the investigation. He seemed professional, competent, trustworthy, until I caught him photographing the documents late one night to send to an unknown contact. Years of nursing had taught me where pressure points lay in the human body. Jenkins never saw the attack coming from a woman my age. When Harper arrived, alerted by my call, he found Jenkins zip-tied to a chair and me holding the agent's own gun with steady hands. "Trust no one," I told Harper, "especially those closest to the investigation." Have you ever realized your inner strength far exceeded what you imagined? Sometimes, our greatest challenges reveal parts of ourselves we never knew existed. I wonder if you've had such moments of discovery in your own life. The weeks that followed blurred into a storm of testimony and depositions. I spoke before federal prosecutors, my voice trembling but unbroken. The papers unraveled a web wider than anyone had guessed. Army weapons vanished from depots, judges signing away rulings for bribes heavier than justice. When I finally faced Judge Holloway across a courtroom, his polished veneer had cracked. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the bright lights of justice. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed as they led him away in chains. "I know exactly what I've done," I answered. "I finished what David Stone started." Not all the guilty were caught. Victor Blackwood and Garrett vanished across the border. Whispers said they'd taken up work for cartels farther south. I didn't doubt I would see Blackwood's face again someday. The government rewarded me with legal claim to Willow Creek Ranch and a sum that, while not a fortune, was enough. Enough to rebuild, enough to plant next season's crops, enough to bring me back from the edge of ruin. 6 months later, I sat on my newly repaired porch watching the sun sink behind distant mountains. The fields were plowed, ready for spring planting. The barn roof no longer leaked. And Elizabeth, my daughter, had moved back to help run the ranch, bringing new ideas about organic farming and local distribution. I had written to Roger, not asking him to return, but to make peace with our past. His reply was kind but distant. We had both moved on. Some wells run dry for a reason. Duke rested his grizzled head on my lap as the last light faded. In the distance, the old well stood covered with a new cap I'd built myself. I kept one coin, though, a reminder that sometimes, what seems like a curse can become salvation if you're brave enough to follow it to its source. Martha and her husband had started a support group for families affected by the smuggling network. I joined them sometimes, sharing what I could of my story. Healing comes in community, in purpose found late in life. Last week, news came that Blackwood had been spotted in Mexico. The threat wasn't gone. Perhaps it never would be. But I no longer feared it the way I once had. At almost 60, I had learned that life is never completely safe. That doesn't mean we can't find peace within the uncertainty. "Mom?" Elizabeth called from inside. "Dinner's ready." Duke's ears perked up. I smiled, patting his head before rising stiffly to my feet. The well's secrets had nearly cost me everything. Instead, they had given me a second chance, not at youth or even wealth, but at something far more precious: purpose. Sometimes, the dry wells in our lives contain the most valuable treasures, not gold, but opportunities to rediscover ourselves. I wonder, what well in your life is waiting to be explored? Share your story in the comments below.